My name is Aura. But long before anybody called me that fancy, they called me Little Bit. 'Cause I was so small I could hide behind Mama's flour sack. Then it was Schoolgirl. 'Cause my braids were always too tight and my books always too many. Then that quiet one, the girl who watched the world from the corner of her eye, cataloging smiles and slights with equal care. Then, finally, Miss Aura, when I started signin' checks with more zeros than most folks in Pine Hollow ever seen in their whole life, stacked up like cordwood. Let me take you back before the money, before the titles, before the dinner that changed everything. Way back to when the biggest decision of the day was whether to play in the red clay behind the shed or under the chinaberry tree, where the fallen berries made for poor ammunition but excellent princess jewels. Pine Hollow wasn't much. It was everything. One paved road, mostly cracked, a perfect canvas for hopscotch grids that washed away in the rain. A post office that doubled as the only place you could buy stamps, a lukewarm soda, and a week's worth of gossip, all for under $2. Mr. Lewis behind the counter knew everybody's business and kept it like a sacred trust. A little holiness church with white paint peelin' like old skin, where Sister Johnson's amens could shake the window panes. And our house, third one past the great oak that got split clean by lightning in '89 and still stood anyway. A lesson in stubbornness we all took to heart. Mama, Miss Ruthie to everybody else, was the strongest person I ever knew. Not loud strong, quiet strong. The kind that don't need to tell you it's strong, you just feel it settle in the room when she walks in, a shift in the atmosphere. Strength was in her hands, wide-palmed and capable, stitching a hem or wringing a chicken's neck with the same gentle efficiency. She had 7 different aprons, each one a chapter of our lives. The blue gingham, patched at the pocket with red thread, for Mondays. The faded yellow with the tiny flowers, its ties knotted and re-knotted, for baking days. She could look at a chicken and know if it was gone lay tomorrow or not, just by the tilt of its head. She could look at me, across a crowded room, and know I was hidden a skinned knee or a hurt feeling before I even thought to open my mouth. After Daddy left, I was 5 3/4, old enough to remember the sharp, clean scent of his aftershave and the way his boots sounded on the porch steps, a particular hollow thunk-thunk that stopped one Tuesday and never started again. Mama never said one bad word about him. Not one. She just stopped keepin' his plate warm. She cleared his coffee mug from the shelf. That was her way of clossin' the door. She filled the space he left with more work, more prayer, more silent songs hummed over the steaming iron. We ate a lot of beans. Pinto beans simmered with a ham hock if we were blessed, with a tablespoon of bacon grease if we weren't. Black-eyed peas on New Year, for luck we were determined to have. Navy beans when the church deacons gave us a big sack, soft and mealy in their thick broth. Mama would put a piece of fat back in the pot and make it taste like Sunday even on a weary Wednesday. Beans are honest food, she'd say. They fill the corners and keep you grounded. I remember one winter, I must have been 9, a cold so deep it stole the breath from your lungs. The pipes froze solid for 3 days. No water for drinking, for washing, for flushing. Mama took the big aluminum pot outside and filled it with the cleanest snow she could find, heaping it high. We melted it on the stove, batch by batch. We bathed out of a single wash pan set in front of the gas heater, its glow painting our skin orange. She washed me last, so the water would still hold a whisper of warmth for me. While she was rinsing my hair, her fingers working careful through the tangles, she sang real low, a hum that was almost a vibration against my scalp. Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home. I didn't know then, shivering in that tin pan, that she was singin' to a god about a loneliness so vast it scared her, singin' for strength to lead us both home through a cold world. She was singin' to herself more than to me. The roadside stand started the summer I was 8 going on 9, a season of too much squash and not enough money. Mama looked at the garden spilling over and said, "If we gone eat what this earth gives, we gone have to sell what it gives extra. If we gone eat, we gone work." So we worked. We'd load up the old wheelbarrow before the sun even thought about cresting the pines, tomatoes warm from the vine, squash gleaming like green and yellow lanterns, okra with its strange, fuzzy hides. I'd sit on an upside-down peach crate with a cigar box for money, the weight of quarters and dimes serious in my lap. Mama taught me to count change back 3 times before I handed it over. "Folks will test you, baby," she said, her eyes not unkind, just factual. Not because they mean to be evil, but because the world tells them a little girl with a cigar box is an easy mark. Always count twice for them and once for yourself. Let your mind be your fortress. Old Mr. Jenkins came every Saturday like clockwork. Always wore the same brown felt hat, its band stained with sweat. Always bought 3 tomatoes, the roundest ones little bit, and 1 cucumber for my vinegar soak. Always, as he took his change, he'd press an extra dime into my palm, curling my fingers over it and say, "Keep studying, girl. Books don't talk back and they never call you a liar." It was years before I understood the pain behind that. Miss Pearl came on Tuesdays, walking slow from the row of mill houses down the road. She never bought much, maybe a handful of greens, a couple of scrawny carrots, but she'd perch on the stump Mama kept for her and talk for 20 minutes. She talked about her son, Robert, in the army, his letters that came too few and far between. She talked about the silence in her house, how it had grown teeth since he left. Mama would listen, shelling peas or mending socks, nodding in all the right places, as if it was the first time she'd ever heard the story. Every single time. That's where I learned listening was a form of love you could give away for free. I learned more sittin' on that crate, watching the dust rise behind passing cars, making change and making note of human nature, than I ever learned in any classroom. But school's school was my other life, my secret garden. Miss Evelyn ran the county library branch, 1 room in the community center, like it was her own precious, fragile child. She wore cat-eye glasses with tiny rhinestones at the corners and always smelled of lavender sachet and the sweet, dusty perfume of old paper. She had a special shelf behind her desk, not for the new, shiny books, but for the good ones. The ones with cracked spines and pages soft as cotton from being loved by so many hands. She'd see me hovering by the history section and she'd glide over, pull one from her secret trove, and hand it to me like she was passing a sacrament. "Read this slow, Ara," she'd whisper, though we were the only ones there. "Some books you don't rush through like a thief. You let M teach you. You move in and live between the lines for a while." In that quiet back corner, under a lamp that buzzed like a sleepy bee, I met Maya Angelou's unbreakable spirit. I walked the dusty roads of Eatonville with Zora. I felt the fire of James Baldwin's truth and swam in the deep, haunting waters of Toni Morrison's worlds. I didn't understand every political reference, every historical nuance, but I felt their souls. I recognized their people. That's what mattered. It was a mirror and a window all at once. Then came the high school debate team. That's what changed the axis of my world. First tournament I ever went to over in Macon, I was so nervous my knees knocked a rhythm beneath the plywood table. I spent 10 minutes in a bathroom stall that smelled of industrial cleaner. Sure I was gonna throw up the biscuit I'd forced down. My opponent was a tall boy from the city academy. He had a suit that fit him like a glove, a voice that boomed without a microphone, and a way of talking about macroeconomic theory like he'd invented it over breakfast. My topic was the dignity of labor. I didn't quote textbooks. I talked about home. About Mama's hands in the snow melt water. About the arithmetic of a cigar box. About the weight of a bushel of peas at the end of a 10-hour day. About people who work sunrise to sunrise and still get looked down on by folks who have never had dirt under their fingernails. My voice didn't boom. It just carried. It settled in the room. I didn't win the big, golden trophy. That went to the boy in the good suit. But I won second place, and the judge, an older woman with kind eyes and a sharp pencil, wrote on my score sheet. "This young lady speaks from a place most of us have never visited and argues with a truth we cannot refute." A formidable voice. Mama kept that paper folded in her Bible, right between Psalms and Proverbs, till the day she died. It was her proof that the world beyond Pine Hollow might have a place for a voice like mine. The college acceptance letter came on a Tuesday, flimsy and official in the mailbox. It felt like a miracle with a postage stamp. Full ride. Academic scholarship. I still got that letter, folded and refolded so many times the creases are soft as flannel, the ink slightly faded where my thumbs have traced the words over the years. The morning I left, dawn was just a pink rumor in the sky. Mama had packed a shoebox for me. Inside, fried chicken still warm from the skillet, wrapped in wax paper and then newspaper for insulation. greens rolled tight in a square of cornbread, a slab of pound cake so dense it could have anchored a ship. She stood on the porch not in her work dress, but in her good one, the blue polyester with the little white flowers, reserved for funerals and graduations. She didn't cry. She hugged me so tight I could feel the steady, strong drum of her heartbeat against mine, a rhythm I was about to lose. "Don't you forget who you are when you get up there in that tall building and that fast talk," she said, her voice a low rasp in my ear. "I won't, Mama. You better not. 'Cause if you do, you just come on home. This porch ain't going nowhere." The bus ride was 5 hours of changing landscapes. I ate that chicken slow, piece by piece, saving the crispiest drumstick for when we crossed the county line into the unknown, a talisman against fear. College was a symphony of noise and newness. It was loud in every way: voices, music, ideas clashing. People seemed born with new everything. New phones that flipped open with a satisfying snap, new clothes with tags still whispering from fancy stores, new attitudes of casual ownership over the world. Me, I had one good wool skirt, 2 serviceable blouses, 1 pair of shoes whose soles didn't leak most days, and a determination that didn't bend, forged in the quiet fires of Pine Hollow. I worked the breakfast shift at the Blue Plate Diner. I'd wear a greasy apron that smelled of old grease and strong coffee, and by 8 a.m. I'd have splashed patterns of coffee and maple syrup on my sleeve like abstract art. There were customers who tipped with a pile of sticky pennies and a grunt, and customers who left a single quarter with a smile that said, "I see you, keep going." Both taught me something about the value of things and the value of people. 3 nights a week, I worked the late shift at the campus library, shelving books in the cathedral-like hush. The silence there was different from home. It was a scholarly silence, full of concentrated thought. When the head librarian wasn't looking, I'd sit in the back corner, history aisle, and study till my eyes burned and the words blurred. I slept in 4-hour chunks and dreamed of ledgers and literature. My first internship was unpaid. It required 2 buses each way, a 2-hour commute. I wore the same navy blazer every day. I washed it in the dorm sink on Sunday nights and hung it over the rattling radiator to dry, praying it wouldn't shrink. I made coffee no one asked for. I listened to conversations I wasn't invited to. I wrote down everything in a cheap notebook, not just tasks, but observations. Mr. Davies likes his reports with the summary first. The client from Chicago prefers ma'am, not miss. I asked questions in meetings when everyone else was afraid to look ignorant. Not show-off questions, real ones. Can you explain how that affects the people on the ground? What's the long-term cost of that shortcut? They kept me on after the internship. Then they found a little money to pay me. Then, bit by bit, they promoted me. I was a sponge in a world of running water. And I never told a soul how fast I was moving. I kept the same 1-bedroom apartment with the noisy pipes, and the neighbor who played saxophone at 2 a.m. I kept driving the '98 Honda Civic with the crack in the windshield that looked like a spider web. And every month, like a sacrament, I sent money order to Mama, not big amounts at first, just $50, then $100. Steady, predictable. She, call, her voice tinny on the bad line. "Girl, you keep that for yourself. Buy you something pretty." "Mama," I'd say, staring at the water stain on my ceiling, "I am keeping it for us. This is my something pretty." The years passed, then like pages in a well-thumbed book, each chapter building on the last. I bought my first house at 25, a little brick fixer-upper with sagging gutters and good bones. I painted it myself, a soft butter yellow. I planted marigolds in a riot out front because Mama loved their stubborn, sunny faces. I rented the 2nd bedroom to a nursing student named Keisha, who paid her rent on time, sang gospel in the shower, and never once complained about my sometimes jarred, always seasoned cooking. I kept climbing, moved to a new company, then a new city for a better title. Director, then vice president. The titles changed every few years. The woman inside them did not. I was still quiet in meetings, speaking last but with precision. I still dressed plain, favoring quality fabric over flashy labels. I was still watching, learning, calculating the angles others missed. And then, when my life was a spreadsheet of quiet accomplishments, the Lord, in his infinite and humorous wisdom, sent me Marcus. He didn't look like money. He looked like home on a good day. He had a smile that took its time reaching his eyes, and hands that looked like they knew how to hold things carefully. We met at a stifling charity fundraiser. He was a guest of a client, looking as out of place as I felt. He turned, gestured with a glass of lemonade, and the entire contents went down the front of my simple linen skirt. The apologies poured out of his mouth like a waterfall, his ears turning pink. And instead of being mortified, I laughed, a real, deep, from-the-belly laugh I hadn't heard from myself in months. We spent the rest of the event tucked away on a balcony, talking. We talked about everything and nothing. He loved his grandfather's woodworking shop. He hated cilantro. He believed in feeding stray cats. We talked until the music stopped and the janitor started sweeping around our feet, giving us a look that was equal parts annoyance and amusement. He didn't ask me what I did for a living until our third date. I told him the truth I showed the world. Mid-level operations manager, decent check, nothing flashy. He nodded, shrugged, and said, "That's honest work. Keeps the world turning." He talked about his own job as a civil engineer, building bridges and fixing water systems with a passion that was about connection, not prestige. It took me 6 months to tell him the rest. The careful savings. The shrewd, early investments in tech stocks everyone else thought were fads. The 3 rental properties I owned under an LLC, fixed up with my own hands on weekends. I laid it out one evening in my living room, bracing for a shift, for greed, for surprise. He just sipped his beer, smiled that slow smile, and said, "You know, I figured you had more going on than you let on. The way you study a restaurant menu like a contract, the way you can estimate the cost of anything in a glance. Doesn't change a thing, Ara, except maybe my awe of you." When he told me he loved me and wanted me to meet his parents, my heart soared. And then my mind, that careful, watchful guardian, got to work. I already knew what I was gone do. The test. Not because I was mean-spirited, not because I wanted to shame them, because I was a product of Pine Hollow and Miss Ruthie. I was careful. I needed to know the soil before I planted my heart there for good. So I borrowed my cousin Darnell's old Chevy truck, the one that coughed and shuddered like it had a 40-a-day habit. I wore the blouse with the tiny, faded violets, the one with the almost invisible mend under the arm. Jeans with real holes from climbing a fence to rescue a kitten. Sneakers with the sole flappin' like a loose tooth. I pulled my hair into a simple ponytail. I looked like I had maybe $2 and a dream. Driving up that long, manicured driveway, lined with perfect crepe myrtles, I felt like an actress in a play I had written, directed, and was now starring in. My stomach was in knots, but my spirit was calm. This was a reconnaissance mission. Veronica opened the massive oak door. Her smile was a tight, polished thing, not reaching her cool blue eyes. Franklin was in the wingback chair by the fireplace, barely looking up from his newspaper, peering over his glasses with an expression of mild, distant curiosity. They sat us at a dining table so long and glossy, I could see my own nervous, plain reflection in it. The china was thin enough to read through. The questions began, polite as pinpricks. "What do your people do, dear? What part of town do you live in?" When I gave vague, modest answers, the tone shifted, subtly but unmistakably. "And what is it you do exactly?" Veronica asked, sipping her wine. "Office work," I said, keeping my eyes on my salad plate. "Clerical, administrative, nothing special. I help keep things running." I saw Veronica's perfectly sculpted eyebrow lift, as if it had its own private opinion of office work. They began talking around me, then over me about Marcus, his potential, his bright future, the kind of asterisk wife that future would require, someone presentable, someone with certain social competencies, someone, Franklin boomed, who fit the picture. Veronica's gaze landed on my hands, resting beside my water glass. No rings, nails short and unpolished, little white scars from garden shears and hot oven racks, a childhood burn from a splattering of grease. She said, her voice dripping with a syrupy faux compassion, "You know, dear, we have wonderful connections. We could help you find some classes, perhaps a seminar on professional etiquette, a little wardrobe consultation. Everyone needs a little polish now and then." It was an offer to erase me and redraw me in their image. Franklin followed, not to be outdone in generosity. He offered a down payment on a suitable house in a better neighborhood, but only if we agreed to a 5-year plan they would help draft, only if we followed their blueprint for our lives. Under the table, Marcus's hand found my knee. It was trembling. Not with fear, I realized, but with a fury he was swallowing whole. I just smiled my small smile, sipped my ice water, let the silence after their generous offers hang in the air, thick as the cream sauce on the asparagus. Then dessert was served, peach cobbler in little porcelain bowls. That's when I pushed my chair back. The legs made a soft sound on the polished floor. All eyes turned to me. "Y'all have been real kind tonight," I said, my voice slow and clear as creek water over stones. No anger, no theatrics, just facts. Real generous with your thoughts and your plans for my life. But I think it's time I was equally generous. I think it's time I told you my whole story. I took my phone from my simple cloth purse. I opened the banking app. I turned the screen and placed it gently on the table next to my untouched cobbler. The numbers on the screen, black and stark, told a story of their own. Then from the same purse, I drew out a single cream-colored business card. I laid it flat beside the phone. Vice President of Strategic Operations. Salary, $40,000 month. Bonus structure, separate. The silence that fell was absolute. It was a physical thing. Swallowing the tick of the grandfather clock in the hall, Veronica's face went as pale as the linen tablecloth. Her hand flew to her throat. Franklin slowly removed his glasses as if they were the things deceiving him. And then I spoke, still soft, still steady. I told them about melting snow for bathwater, about the weight of a cigar box full of a family's hope, about the Navy blazer washed in a dorm sink and dried on a radiator, about the 3 properties, the leaky roof I'd fixed myself, the floorboards I'd sanded until my arms ached, the tenants I treated like family, about the lonely nights in silent apartments, crying from exhaustion, then wiping my face and opening the textbooks again because giving up was a luxury I couldn't afford. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't point a finger. I just unfolded my history and laid it on their mahogany table next to their sterling silver. I needed to know, I said, finally meeting Veronica's shocked, swimming eyes, then Franklin's stunned gaze, if you could sit at a table with me when I was just Aura. Not Aura with the portfolio, not Aura the VP, just Aura, the woman your son loves. Because if you couldn't love her, you'd never really know me. And I need people around me who know me. Marcus stood up then. He walked to my side and put his arm around my shoulders, his touch firm, sure. He looked at his parents, his own eyes bright with a mixture of pain and fierce pride. "She's always been this woman," he said, his voice thick. "Strong, brilliant, and the most real person I've ever met. Y'all were just too busy looking at the frame to see the masterpiece." We laid down rules that night, clear as spring water, firm as oak. No strings tied to their money, no unsolicited advice on our lives, no judgment on our choices, our home, our future children. Respect, genuine, unconditional respect, or a respectful, loving distance. 6 months later, we married under the sprawling canopy of that same Chinaberry tree in Pine Hollow. Mama wore her blue flowered dress, a new light in her eyes. Veronica brought 4 different cobblers, her hands shaking as she offered them. I was nervous, she admitted, a raw honesty I'd never seen before. Franklin, in a simple suit, shook my hand, held my gaze, and said, "You have my respect, Aura, and my apology." It was enough. Now we got Bobby's, 2 lights of my life. Isaiah, our boy, is 7. He tears every clock and radio apart to see the magic inside, his brow furrowed in the same concentration I saw on Marcus's face when he studies blueprints. Ruth Ann, our 5-year-old girl, doesn't just draw pictures. She draws feelings, a sun with a tear, a tree with arms hugging a house, pictures that make you stop and catch your breath. We live simple by choice. A house big enough for laughter to echo, but small enough that we can't hide from each other. Worries small enough to be managed with love and logic. I still have Mama's old cast iron skillet on my stove, seasoned by decades of our history. I still hear her voice in my head every morning. "Rise and shine, child. The world ain't gonna conquer itself." And Veronica, she comes over now, not often but regularly. She brings recipes clipped from magazines, sometimes missing an ingredient or with the oven temperature wrong, and we decipher them together. She talks haltingly about her own mother, a society woman of impossible standards, how hard she was to please, how much Veronica regrets repeating that pattern. We sit on my porch sometimes, the one I had built wide enough for rocking chairs, sipping tea. Sometimes we talk. Sometimes we just listen to the crickets and the children's laughter floating from the yard. No words are needed to bridge that quiet space anymore. Franklin asks about my business deals now, not to compete or one-up, but with a true curiosity. How do you see the potential in that neighborhood before anyone else? He'll ask, and I'll tell him about noticing which stores were opening, what the streets felt like at dusk, the kind of pride people took in their window boxes. He listens. He learns. And me. I still rise before the sun. I still make my bed so tight you could bounce a quarter on it, a habit from years of needing order in small things to manage the chaos of big things. I still plant marigolds every single spring, their orange and yellow heads a promise to Mama, and to myself that some roots only grow deeper with time.